Well, welcome back again, folks. This is a further extended lecture. It's the second part in our discussion of ancient and medieval views on the nature of wisdom. Today I'd like to explore with you the medieval thought on wisdom, and I'll just use Thomas Aquinas as the best exponent or spokesman of that particular way into the subject matter. We just finished talking about Aristotle last time. Thomas loved Aristotle. He thought Aristotle was so good. He didn't even call him Aristotle. He just called him the philosopher, like as if he's the only philosopher there is. Well, it's like the only philosopher for him, right? So he pays a lot of respect or homage to Aristotle. So in he has this great big book. If you could get into the library at the university, U of C, University of Calgary, doesn't let you see the books anymore. They like to hide them. But he has this book called the Summa Theologica, and it is volumes and volumes and volumes. Aquinas wrote voluminously. So I would encourage you to sneak in the dead of night, break into the library, and go and look at it, leaf through the pages. I mean, you can find copies of it online. New Advent is a wonderful website that you can read the whole thing there. But the old Blackfriars hardbound editions are cool because you got the Latin on the one side and then the English on the other, and it's pretty nice. So we're going to talk about Aquinas here. In his Summa Theologica, Thomas asks whether or not human life has an ultimate goal. No. Similar to John, this is interesting. Aquinas, what he does when he argues, is he gives you both sides of a position, right? If he's exploring the idea, happiness as being the ultimate end for human beings, he'll give you like the best thinkers on the one side of the issue, and then he'll give you the best thinkers on the other side of the issue, and then he'll respond, right? He'll say, well, this, and then he'll go through and he'll take apart point by point each of the arguments as they occur. And he does this all just from his memory. Like he was just so smart, this guy. So one response to this anyway, whether or not human life has an ultimate goal, is to say no. So similar to John Dewey, Thomas provides arguments that aims are goals, stretch out indefinitely, and that our aims may in fact simply be provisional rather than final. That's Dewey, right? That's what Dewey wants to say. Everything is provisional. There is no final end. If you think there's a final, tell us. It's an imposed external end, and it's poppycock or balderdash or whatever other words you can think of. All right. So this is the no response, and that there can be a series of aims without limit. The other side of it is to say yes, there is an ultimate goal. However, Thomas replies to these contentions that to maintain an indefinite is to deny it the nature of a good, which means being an end. The prospect of going on indefinitely is tantamount to this. Hence, the need of positing an ultimate end. All right, so an ultimate end is always needed. This indefinite is going on and on and on is lacking in some kind of meaning that's suggested when we seek for things, right? In other words, whenever there is intention, it is the prospect of the goal in mind that originally moves desire. Right? There's always a goal in mind moving your desire. Take this away, and desire would be moved by nothing. Were there no ultimate end, nothing would be desired. No activity would be finished. No desire would come to a rest. Were there no first step to the end, no one would start doing anything or make up his mind, but instead would deliberate interminably. So Thomas is not, it's not like he's not recognizing, I'm hungry. My end right now is to go make myself a sandwich, right? And then that's done, and you put that end away. And then you go on to the next one. Well, now I got to go to school or I got to go to work. It's not like that. I mean, he's not stupid. He recognizes that there are provisional ends, but he says you have to recognize an ultimate end. Otherwise, all this stuff starts to fall apart. It makes no sense. Another question important for our study is asked by Thomas. Is there one ultimate end for all human beings? So, the one side of it is no. This question is a particularly difficult one to answer honestly and reasonably in today's school setting, right? Where a positive response would likely smack of intolerance, undemocratic sentiment, and be condemned as contrary to the principles of modern pluralistic society. If you were to say, yeah, we all have one end and I'm going to tell you what it is, what about the fact that we live in this multicultural pluralistic society where, we all have our own ideas about what happiness is and all this, and we should be allowed to, search those things out as long as we're not stepping on each other's toes and the rest of it. That's what Aquinas is just recognizing here. Besides, there are good reasons, says Thomas, to suppose that there is not one ultimate end for all human beings. For instance, Thomas notes that were the end the same for all, men would not choose diverse walks of life, whereas in point of fact they do. This is all stuff Dewey says. Empirical observation of human behavior in the real world lends itself to dismissing the strange notion that there is one final end and that all human beings share it in common. The actions of human beings are individual affairs. Moreover, though men agree in their common specific nature, they're quite diverse in their personal proclivities. All right, so we all have a common nature, but you and I are different people, right? We had different things that we like. I like this kind of stuff. Probably a lot of you guys couldn't care less about it or whatever, right? But you like something else that's really wonderful, and maybe I don't share your interest in it. I don't know. Consequently, their chief aims are not identical. In other words, although we're all human, this doesn't mean that we all share the same goals or interests in our actions. The other side of it, not the no, the yes, right? However, Thomas overcomes these objections simply by stating, all agree in desiring that ultimate which is happiness. All right, everybody wants to be happy. That's what he says. Indeed, elsewhere in the Summa, Thomas is emphatic that it is beyond the capacity of human beings to will not to be happy. You might think that's a bit weird, but that's what he says. Thomas explains that there are two ways we can speak of the ultimate end or the final end. Namely, according to its meaning and according to its mode of realization. As for the first, all human beings, says Thomas, are in agreement because all desire their complete fulfillment, which is what the final end means. As for the second, however, not all of us are in agreement. For some of us want riches, right? You think that's what's going to make you happy. Others, a life of pleasure. Others, something else. Maybe other people seek displeasure because, that's what they get off on. Honestly, there's all kinds of things that motivate people. Part of the project of the educator, it would seem, is to direct human beings towards a better understanding of what precisely is their ultimate end. According to Thomas, this knowledge of the ultimate end is wisdom. Now, in Latin, the word for wisdom is shifted here. It's no longer Sophia, it's Sapientia. Okay? Like Aristotle, Thomas, too, is aware of the various ways in which the word wisdom may be meant. On the one hand, he recognizes that the term can be used to designate great or masterful knowledge concerning a particular genus of things. We've talked about that already. One might be wise in the ways of physics, math, medicine, carpentry, or bookkeeping, for example. On the other hand, there's a higher meaning that Thomas recognizes and wishes to illuminate and further subdivide into two new categories. This is the meaning of Sapientia as the knowledge of God. So first, Thomas speaks of an intellectual virtue, afforded the name of Sapientia. All right, this is new. This is a departure from Aristotle, folks. As a speculative virtue, Sapientia is the perfection of that element of the human intellect that seeks out knowledge of the highest things and the ultimate cause of all things according to its own natural capacities. Okay, so he's saying there's Sapientia as an intellectual virtue. It's what any human being can do, just, thinking, trying to figure stuff out, trying to, use their mind in order to understand what wisdom is. And, by natural reason, we can get some kind of sense of what that is, or what God is, for that matter. Second, Thomas contends that there is also a higher form of sapientia than mere intellectual prowess. It's a superior knowledge of God that is not derived from the workings of reason, study, or human effort, but is only attained through the Holy Ghost as a divine gift. Okay, so this is different than the intellectual virtue. This is sapientia, or wisdom, as a gift, and the Latin word for gift is donum, right? We get our word donate from that, right? When you donate to somebody or some cause or whatever. Here, we have an important observation on Thomas's part that unlike prudentia, ars, or scientia, these are virtues, prudence, art, and science, and also sapientia when discussed as an intellectual virtue, this highest sort of wisdom isn't teachable. Okay? It's a gift. It's not teachable. The distinction Thomas makes between these two higher gradations of wisdom is rendered best as follows. Here's what he says. The gift of wisdom, or rather the wisdom which is called a gift of the Holy Ghost, differs from that which is acquired intellectual virtue, for the latter is attained by human effort. Whereas, we sit there and we think, right? And we try to logic through and try to understand the nature of wisdom or the nature of the divine or something like that, right? It's through our efforts, the labor of the mind. Whereas the former is descending from above, descends upon us. Or on like manner, it differs from faith, since faith assents to the divine truth itself, whereas it belongs to the gift of wisdom to judge according to divine truth. Hence, the gift of wisdom presupposes faith, because a man judges well what he knows. Okay, so Thomas is suggesting that this particular element of wisdom, this is related to being a person of faith. In Thomas's view, it seems that Aristotle's enucleation of Sophia and the possibility that the nous might pursue wisdom through theoria, or gazing upon the ariston as an union of knower and known, is not admissible outside of the Christian faith, since faith is presupposed in any case where the gift of wisdom is bestowed. All right, so this is his sneaky way of saying that only Christians who have faith can have wisdom. That Aristotle and these pagans, they've got a kind of wisdom, this intellectual virtue that they've cultivated, but they don't have wisdom, the gift, the donum, and you only receive that through faith. Do you understand? Interestingly, by differentiating wisdom in this way, sapientia undergoes a simultaneous demotion and promotion. All right, so he split it up. One part of it kind of looks crappy suddenly, and the other part of it looks like something that only Christians have. On the one hand, pagan philosophic articulations of wisdom and its pursuit are rendered impotent in the attainment of their ultimate object. At most, such philosophic endeavors can cultivate the intellectual virtue of wisdom. On the other hand, Sapientia, as the divine gift, supplants even faith in its gloriousness. Right? It's better than fides, inasmuch as fides only assents to the divine truth, whereas Sapientia is able to judge by it. In this regard, the majesty of Sapientia as divine gift and a consequence of charity or love even overtakes Prudentia in the realm of practical affairs, where judgment is the mainstay of action. All right, so this wisdom is a gift. This is the big cheese. This is the top of the pyramid for Thomas. But again, for him, this is the tricky thing. It's only available to people of Christian faith. So, it's precisely the notion of wisdom as donum that is most thoroughly rejected in modern thought. This is something, I think it's a really important thing to remember here, folks. And because it's also this form of wisdom that cannot be taught, one therefore is led to wonder what place its discussion has in any investigation of the role of wisdom in education. They just toss it out. Wisdom as a gift. Tossed right out. And if it's a gift that can't be taught, then why would we even talk about it in school? That's where we're supposed to be teaching people stuff. The rationale for speaking of such wisdom as above the natural capacities of human beings is provided by Thomas in his discussion of how God is known by us. Here's what he says in the Summa. To know self-subsistent being is natural to the divine intellect alone. And this is beyond the natural power of any created intellect. For no creature is its own existence, for as much as its existence is participated. Therefore, the created intellect cannot see the essence of God, unless God, by His grace, unites Himself to the created intellect as an object made intelligible to it. Right? The idea is God exists in and of Himself as being, right? And all of us only exist to the extent to which we participate in God's being. All right? So we don't know self-subsistent being in and of ourselves. We're relying upon God. If we're going to do anything like that, if we're going to be able to do that, we need to do it through Him. Simply put, in Thomas's view, God, or the supreme cause of all things, is beyond all things that can be thought or intellected. Anything that we can think of is not God. Thought can only aspire to grasp intelligible things, but God is beyond all that is finitely intelligible or comprehensible. Strictly speaking, it's beyond the nature of the human intellect and its manner of apperceiving the truth through reason to be able to attain to a truth that is not subject to duality, multiplicity, or analysis. When the human intellect therefore finds itself in the act of gazing upon this highest reality, or the ground of all that is real, it can only do so by transcending its own nature. See? A little bit more on Thomas on the illumination of the intellect here. Everything which is raised up to what exceeds its nature must be prepared by some disposition above its nature. But when any created intellect sees the essence of God, the essence of God itself becomes the intelligible form of the intellect, Hence it's necessary that some supernatural disposition should be added to the intellect in order that it may be raised up to such a great and sublime height. This increase of the intellectual powers is called the illumination of the intellect. So, Thomas writes that the illumination of the intellect, which enables the intellect to engage in direct knowing of the divine through contemplation, arises as a result of divine grace, love, or charity, caritas. The donum, or the gift of wisdom, is a kind of sympathy or connaturality for divine things that results from the influence of love, the highest among the theological virtues. Further, Thomas states that, that while faith and hope, the other two theological virtues, may exist imperfectly without love, it's impossible for love or charity to exist without the other two. Consequently, it seems that human beings cannot properly be said to exhibit caritas, or the love of God, unless their love is informed by both faith and hope. Thomas's sense of wisdom, or Sapientia, as the highest gift of love in this way seems to be the sole preserve of those who abide in Christian teachings. See, so again, he's always trying to make this space. He's a man, deeply Catholic faith. He comes from a great long tradition of philosophy, pursuing wisdom himself. But he wants to say that the only way to really do that is through his own, Christian mode of searching. So some questions here for you. What role does philosophy have in relation to the donum of wisdom? Is philosophy even capable of pursuing its object to the fullest extent? Right? What if you're Aristotle, even though he loves Aristotle, when push comes to shove for Aquinas, not so much, right? Is philosophy in some sense impotent as compared with theology, for instance? That is, if we're serious about pursuing wisdom, must we all be theologians of a particular creed, with a particular faith, and particular hopes? Is philosophy ever exiled, or forever exiled from its highest desire? This is something we could discuss in class, if you'd like. But these are, you can see right here already, if you're planning to be a public school teacher, which I imagine most of you are, and yet, you still love wisdom. Do you find, Thomas is really wonderful, but what's going on here? Like, do you find any of this kind of troubling? Do you feel in some sense like you've been exiled from, your highest desire in wisdom? And what about your students, right? You're going to have students from all over the world, all over different traditions. How do we make sense of what's going on here? All right, ladies and gentlemen, so I'll talk to you in the next lecture a little bit more about taxonomies of learning. Thank you.